Hello, welcome to Unit 6, the final unit for this course Principles of Economics. We are going to look at 6 different sessions under these units and then close the entire course Principles of Economics. In session 1, we are going to talk about the utility theory. Now, let me ask this question. If you are about to compare the shopping bags of any two consumers, you would observe striking difference. Why does budget have, say, rice, carrots, meat pie, and Pepsi? Bridget, let me say, I don't know your name, but let me use any name. Why? Let me use my name. Why does Emmanuel have rice, carrots, meat pie, and Pepsi in his bag, while Vero has sugar, soap, Gary, and 7 Up in her bag? Why didn't Vero have pork and spaghetti? In this session, you will see how individual consumers allocate their money incomes among the various goods and services among them. And so by the end of the session, we believe that you should be able to define total, marginal, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. You should be able to state the utility maximizing rule, and you use the utility maximizing rule to determine how consumers would spend their fixed income. So let's get started. Let's start with the concept of utility. Now, the benefit or satisfaction a person gets from consuming a good or service is what we call utility. So, we're talking about the benefit or satisfaction that a person gets from the consumption of good or a service. So, when we talk about utility, you should be able to tell us what utility means. Now, utility is an abstract theoretical concept. Abstract is something like we imagine. Theoretical a concept and units of utility are chosen arbitrarily. Now, the concept of utility helps us make predictions, although not precise. So, although not precise, it helps us make predictions about choices, consumption choices. The amount of utility that a person gets depends on the person's level of consumption. The more consumption gives more utility. I'm going to introduce us to some tables as examples for us to understand what we are talking about here. So when we sketch, it's going to be something like, so I assume I have the Veros utility. Let me draw the table again. So we have quantity per month. I want to look at Veros utility, then units of utility. I have up to here, then up to here. So I'll move from 0 to 14. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now the utilities will be 0, 50, 88. For 3 we have 121. For 4 we have 150. 5 is 175. 6 we have 196. 17 we have 214. 8 we have 229. 9 we have 241. And then 10 we have 250. For 11 we have 256. For 12 we have 259. 13 is also 259. Then for 14 we also have 256. Now you can see from this table that when she watches no movie, the utility or satisfaction is also 0. But at assuming she watches 10 movies, she benefits or she gets 250 units of utility. We can illustrate this on a graph. We can draw a graph. This is origin. This will also be quantity. but the vertical will be units of utility instead of say price in the sense of demand and supply. So our curve is going to be something like this. TU. Alright. So we can clearly look at the diagram or the utility that Vero gets from watching movies, and clearly the more movies she watches in a month, the more utility she gets. So let's talk about Vero's total utility. Total utility. Marginal utility is the additional utility derived from the last unit of a good consumed. You have to put that in mind. Marginal utility is additional utility derived from the last unit of a good consumed. We can calculate marginal utility as the change in utility that occurs when one more unit of a good is consumed. We can use this same table that we have here to find marginal utility. So let me clean the graph that I have here. Then we add marginal utility column to the table. All right. Okay. So assume we want to find the marginal utility using the information in this same table. So here I'll write marginal utility. In short, you can say MU, marginal utility. Okay. So now from 0 to 0, 0 here, there was nothing before it, so here is dash. But 0 to 50, 50 minus 0, what do we get? We get 50. Now from when she watches two movies, it moved from 50 to what? 88. What is the marginal utility? We want to find the change between this and this, and what are we going to get? We are going to get 38. You can, so we are going to find the difference between the immediate one and the past one. So here too we are going to have like 33. You can do your calculation on all and compare your answers to mine. Let's see if you are going to get the same thing. Okay, then 25 here will be 21. I'll have here to be 18. I'll have here to be 15. 12. For here to be 9. I'll have here to be 6. I'll have here to be 3. I'll have here to be 0. I'll have here to be minus 3. Alright. So from this table that we have drawn here, you can see the marginal utility of Vero's consumption of movies. And when Vero's consumption increases from 4 to 5 movies, as we have on this table, from 4 to 5, what happens? We see that the utility increases from what? 150 to 175, right? As we can see here at this side, that the marginal utility of Vero's fifth movie each month is what? 25. It's 25 units. There is a change in consumption from 4 to what? 5 movies. That was how we got it. So we're changing from 4 to 5. So how do we get the change? It's the 175 minus what? 150. That was what led us to the 25 units for the marginal utility. So from this we can get another graph. So let me sketch a graph. Let me sketch a graph. By the side of this table I can have something like this. Alright, we still have the units of utility, units of what? Utility. Here is our quantity, here is the origin. In this case I'm going to have something like this, where others may call it the indifference curve. So we are looking at Vero's marginal utility. So the graph tells us that as Vero watches more movies, the marginal utility that she gets falls. So for example, her marginal utility from the first movie is 50 units, as you can see from the table. From the second, the marginal utility is 38, and from the third is 33 units. We call this decline in marginal utility as the consumption of a good increases the principle of diminishing marginal utility. And so the law of diminishing marginal utility states that as more and more of a good is consumed, the marginal utility declines. Let me repeat that. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as more and more of a good is consumed, the marginal utility declines. Now we still hold that ceteris paribus, that is, all things being equal. We can now talk about utility maximization and then bring this session to an end. Now, utility maximization is the attainment of the greatest possible, let me underline it, greatest possible utility, the attainment of the greatest possible utility by a consumer. However, there are constraints to the maximization of utility, and we have to know the constraints. What are the constraints? We look at the individual household has a fixed amount of income in a period. So the satisfaction or the utility of consuming something is based or subject to an income of the household. We also look at the prices of the commodities that the person can buy, and we say the prices are fixed by the market. All right, so when you are asked the constraints, we should be able to state them. So these constraints limit the utility that one can actually obtain. Now let's assume Bridget spends all of her monthly income on only movies. Or let's say Vero. I used Vero, but here I've typed Bridget, so kindly forgive me. Is typing mistake. Vero spends all of her monthly income on only movies. She likes watching movies. Harry Potter and Gladiator. Now, in a one commodity situation like this, she purchases amounts of the good up to the point where the marginal utility of the last unit purchase is equal to the marginal utility of the price of the good. Just as we've written here, the MUX, marginal utility of X, is equal to what? Price of X. So where the marginal MUX is the marginal utility of the last unit of the movie, and PX is the market price of the movie. Here we can say that X is standing for the movie. Now we can sketch a graph for this also. Let me try and sketch a graph. Okay, so something like this. We know that for utility, the vertical is what? Units of what? Utility, and the horizontal is still what? Quantity. Marginal utility will look like this. Now we can have something like this. You can say Q1, here is origin, here is going to be PX. Here can we say E. Let's talk about this diagram. Now in this diagram, a consumer is in equilibrium at E, this E, point E. Alright. When Q1, the Q1 we have here, units of movies will be seen every month, where MUX is equal to PX. So the consumer equilibrium is a situation in which a consumer has allocated his or her income in a manner that maximizes what? Utility. So with the law of diminishing marginal utility operating, implications of changes in the price of the good are obvious. That is, if the price of the commodity rises, equilibrium will be established only when the consumer buys less or more of the commodity. So in the case of two or more goods, the consumer maximizes total utility when he distributes his expenditure among the various things he buys in such a way that the ratio of their marginal utility to their respective prices will be equal. And we are looking at the ratio, so assuming I have different commodities, I can have X, Y, Z, blah blah blah. So the ratios of their marginal utility to their respective prices should be equal. They should be the same, and that establishes the equilibrium condition for utility. So we can say up to the last commodity. All right, this is the equilibrium condition. So we say that the consumer is in the equilibrium when the marginal utility per cedi spent is equal for all the goods, good X, Y up to good N. So now, do you know that there are some effects of price changes? All right, we note that if the price of commodity X rises, if the price of commodity X rises or falls, the consumer will buy less of it, thus increasing or decreasing the marginal utility so as to re-establish an equilibrium with the law of diminishing marginal operating. Hence, given the marginal utilities schedules of the consumer for commodities, a change in the price of one good will cause the consumer to rearrange his or her purchases. The consumer will decrease the consumption of the good whose price has risen and increase his consumption of the good whose price has decreased. That brings us to the end of this session.